You may have seen this story coming out of San Francisco, a proposal for reparations, like hundreds of millions of dollars in reparations. Why? Last I checked, California was on the proper side of the Civil War. That wasn't a slave state. So what are they repairing? To sort it all out is the host of a Fresh Perspective podcast, Jeff Charles, also a contributor at RedState, part of the Salem family. Hello, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is going to be fun.
I mean, I'm not a history major or anything, but whenever I see how the states in the Civil War are split out, I don't see California as being part of the Deep South. Is there some sort of slave ownership tradition I'm unaware of?
Not per se, but I think that's actually one of the misconceptions about reparations. Reparations is not just for slavery, it's also for what happened after. Like you had your Jim Crow laws, you had your black codes, you had your redlining, and a lot of other policies that they put in place in lieu of slavery since they couldn't do that anymore. And those are the policies that states like California is supposedly trying to repair.
Okay. And what are the details? Because I saw some numbers that flew by that looked extraordinary, like $5 million worth of reparations for California's participation in those things?
Yeah, see, and this is where it gets to my gripe about this whole thing. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of reparations. If somebody has a plan that might seem like it might work without raising taxes, I might not oppose it. But when I see numbers like $5 million for Californians born between 1940 and 1996 from San Francisco, I'm like, okay, this isn't a serious thing. This is just these progressives doing what they always do. They always dangle stuff like this in front of black voters to endear themselves to the black community and also to people outside of the black community to get votes and to make it look like they're virtuous. They are not going to do this. This is a smokescreen. It's a red herring, and that's really my problem with this whole thing.
So if they're not going to do this, it's something. This was a commission that was meant to study this idea, right? And this is the proposal that they put forth. If it's going to get voted down, doesn't that mean, I mean, by the new definition, that the elected officials in San Francisco, all of them Democrats, if they say no, that makes them racist, right, Jeff?
No, Larry, the definition only applies to people they don't like. It doesn't apply to them.
Oh, all right.
Progressives can do whatever racist stuff they want and not have to be held accountable for it. That only applies to people like you and me. I can't believe you don't know that. Get it right.
All right. That's fair. That's fair. I apologize. I mean, you'd think by now I would get that. You're right, but I didn't. But that is what we're facing here. By the way, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he also asked for a statewide exploration of this, too. As you mentioned, this is just a way to sort of get votes or solidify the black vote or the African American vote or the woke white liberal vote moving forward?
I think that's probably part of it. But when I looked at the recommendations for the state of California, I saw some other stuff. And in some of those bills, I saw some things like, I'm like, okay, that might make sense. That might make sense. But then I see a lot of woke agenda stuff in there, like wanting to increase the teaching of subjects inspired by critical race theory in schools, talking about environmental racism, shade racism. There's a lot of stuff in those recommendations. So this could actually be something that they want to pass, but what they want to do is they want to stick a bunch of this woke nonsense and progressive agenda, this climate agenda, into what is a reparations initiative in order to say that they're helping black people. But what they're really doing is a Trojan horse to enact a lot of other stuff.
I also saw part of the recommendation here that if you can prove that you were a victim to the failed war on drugs, that also puts you in a position to receive reparations. Again, isn't there something sort of inherently racist about that suggestion that if your family or you specifically were jailed due to the crackdown on drugs or what was known as the war on drugs, that would apply to black people? There were white people who got caught up in that as well, weren't there?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, if you were white and you got caught up in the war on drugs, if you got busted for smoking crack, I think you should get reparations too. So that should really apply to anybody who was caught up in that war on drugs. And there is a lot of evidence showing that a lot of those laws were used for racist purposes. That's why Biden gets a lot of the blame for writing that crime bill. But at the same time, there are other areas where other citizens were harmed as well. Really, this is government malfeasance that we're talking about here, and the government needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, that's you're right. Biden and Clinton fingerprints all over those policies and those sentencings. Although, strangely, Hunter Biden, who we all know smoked crack, habitually, never even arrested for it, Jeff Charles. It's almost like there's two sets of rules.
Yeah, imagine that. He'll never get busted for smoking crack. I'm pretty sure if I went on TV and said, "Hey, I was smoking crack last week," I wouldn't get the same treatment.
Yeah.
I don't smoke crack though.
So, I mean, it's interesting to me that you have a fundamental openness to the idea of reparations. Let's talk about the war on drugs and those sentencings for a minute, because there are a lot of Americans who will hear you say that and say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. If you made the bad life decision to try crack, get addicted to crack, buy crack, if you broke the law, why should I didn't make those decisions? I didn't break the law. I didn't get addicted to drugs. Why should my tax dollars go to repair you for your bad life choices?
So first off, it wouldn't necessarily have to be tax dollars. I mean, the government sits on tons and tons of resources to where they wouldn't necessarily have to raise taxes to do reparations. When I'm talking about this area of the war on drugs, I'm talking about an issue with sentencing disparities, right? You could get 11 times the sentencing time for possessing crack than you would for powder cocaine, even though chemically they're really close enough to where there's not enough of a difference for that. And that was specifically used to target Black people. You had the fact that our government brought crack cocaine into the communities. So there's a lot of nuance to it, and some of it I disagree with, and others that I don't. But when I see that the government has wronged and specifically targeted a group like they did with the Japanese, they should have to be held accountable. Yeah. I'm not open to every single reparations plan that has been put forth, but I mean, there's some that I am definitely open to, because I don't believe that the government, the state, should be allowed to mistreat its citizens and get away with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's a fundamentally conservative position to have, that if the government mistreats individual citizens systemically, as I think there's plenty of evidence they've done, then there should be some sort of repair. So I guess, Jeff, if we could in our final minute or so here, sort of lay out the conservative case for reparations of some sort.
You know, I would say that the government does owe a debt. I mean, we have the federal government, but then we also have state governments that participated in a lot of these things. And again, it wasn't just slavery. These policies were, I mean, they were specifically designed to place Black Americans behind other Americans. It was a systemic and deliberate initiative. So that is responsible for a lot of what we see today. I mean, I'm not taking personal responsibility off the table, but at the same time, when you have the United States government using these policies specifically, then it's going to have an impact. And they didn't just end when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. It didn't all just go away. The effects still linger. And by the way, most of this stuff was supported and passed by Democrats. Yeah. So I do believe that a level of recompense is necessary to right the wrong that the government did, just like governments are forced to make recompense whenever they wrong anybody.
So, I mean, historically, it was the British who started the chattel slavery, right, back in the day when they were colonizing America. So if we can get some of that Prince Harry and King Charles money, I might be on board with this, too. It's really their fault.
You know what? I didn't think of it that way, and I'm for that. Maybe the royal family should be ponying up some cash.
Maybe we should all move into Meghan Markle's new digs. That was pretty good.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right,
not with her in it, though.
No, God, no. Jeff, I don't think anyone deserves that. Not even Prince Harry. Jeff Charles, always good to talk with you. Thanks, my friend. Red State contributor. More to come on O'Connor tonight.